Hey y'all, there's a couple things I planned on doing today that I'm not going to be able to do. So I got to do what I can. And one of the things I'm thinking about is for a while I've been thinking about building an apparatus to haul sheets of things on the side of the super service truck. I've had occasions where I wanted to take a sheet that was 8 feet long and 12 feet long, maybe if it's sheetrock, 12 feet long, and haul it on the truck. Now, obviously, if it was a sheet of steel and something too heavy for me to lift by hand in any way, I'm going to put it up on top of the overhead rack and deal with it with a forklift. But I've run into occasions where it was something that I could lift, like a 4x8 sheet of plywood. I can handle that. 4x12 sheets of half-inch sheetrock even, that's something that I can lift. And if it's something that I can lift, and I'm going to be somewhere where I don't have lifting equipment like a forklift, then it's really handy to have it on the side of the truck leaned up instead of on top, because it's going to be tough to get it off the top. If I could make something that leaned it up on the side of the service truck where I could pretty much walk up there, get a hand underneath of it and a hand on top of it and carry it, then that would be, I think, something I could use. Now, I'm not going to want it on the truck permanently, and there's ways I think fabrication can be done to make something that'll do what I want to do that I can take off. So let's take a look at the side of the truck. This is where I'm imagining something being. Some 4x8 sheets of plywood or 4x12 sheets of sheetrock or something. If it was sheetrock, it would, that's an 8-foot truck bed, so it'd probably run to maybe from the back of that vise to about where the two doors meet together, which would be fine. So what I'm thinking of, if you look right here, you can see where these are the pieces that I have that I can put in there in different ways. And that's the purpose of that, really, is where if I have some pipe that I'm putting on top or something I'm putting on top, putting these in here, that slides into that sleeve, and this piece on the top would keep things from rolling off the side. And the way it is right now, there's less sticking up. I think I can flip it around and make it stick up higher. While we're on this subject, I'll show you another apparatus. This is something I use sometimes, and I stick it in the back, and I'll show you what I do with that. Right now where I'm at is up in the back of the truck. You can see how the overhead rack here is. Right there's one of the things that I use to keep things from rolling off. And normally whenever I'd be doing that, I would pull this pin out of this bar and swing it over and pin it right there. So I'll show you that real quick. That's what that back bar does whenever I've swung it around and pinned it right here. Now I've got this that I can lay things on, and you can see there's all kinds of surface to put long things on here. It's not desirable all the time, because a lot of times I get up in the back of the truck to get to my toolbox or whatever I'm doing. If that bar is there, it'd be in the way. I swing the bar across like that when I want to haul some stuff on the top, and if it's pipe or whatever and I don't want it to slide off, then I'm using these. And like I said, these can be put both ways. Right there it's sticking up a little higher. When I don't need that, I've usually got them in there like that. Or obviously you can just leave them out. And let me put this back bar back, and I'll show you some more about what this gizmo does. That rear bar swung back over here, pinned out of the way. That's where that's at most of the time. Getting back to this thing, what I'll do sometimes, take that out, put that in. So let's take a look at that. Looking at it from the back, you might be able to see this is something that works really good if I'm hauling a bundle of material that's a fairly small diameter. It doesn't matter, you know, it can be long, come clear out past here. But what those bars do, obviously, if it's a bundle of tubing or pipe, maybe conduit, PVC, you know, who knows, whatever, rebar. It could be steel of some sort. What this does is it bundles it together in a way that I don't necessarily have to have the back bar going all the way across, and I can keep it contained in that little area. And just one more thing I can mention about things where you have a tube that slides in a tube. What I've got right here, this is the antenna. It's the antenna to my cell signal booster. I have a signal booster in the truck. This increases the range of my cellular signal. And it's important, especially this time of year here in the Appalachian Basin. It's green. A lot of leaves on the trees this time of year. And if you're in the bottom of a holler where there's a bunch of leaves on the trees in the Appalachian Basin this time of year, you probably have no signal at all. Now, what we often do, if possible, to get signal is go to the top of the hill. And if you're on top of the mountain around here, just about everywhere, you can get cell signal. But a lot of places in a holler, even with the leaves on, I can put my phone on my booster pad in the truck, and with the signal amplifier in this antenna, I can get out and make a call. So you see how, like, most of the time, my cell booster antenna is in this thing. But if need be, I can put it up in there, which obviously makes the antenna a lot higher. And sometimes that's all it takes to be the difference in being able to make a call. So that's another idea for a sleeve. And this is just stuff that you can do when you have a tube that fits in another tube. So we'll take a look at some tubing, and this is, I think it's important with fabrication because it's very useful when you have a tube that slides into another tube for some reason like this. What I got on the table right here is some different sizes of square tubing. This one right here, this is a 2x2 by quarter. So it's a 2-inch OD, 2-inch OD with a 1/4-inch wall thickness. If you look at this one, this is a 2x2 by 3/16. And I want you to think of the 3/16 when you think of the sleeves, because when you want to sleeve something, the 3/16 wall is what I just almost always go to. Obviously, if we do the math on this one right here, if you have a 2x2 that's a 1/4-inch wall, if you take a 1/4 inch off of 2, you're at 2 3/4, or 1 3/4. And if you take another 1/4 inch off of that, you're at 1 1/2. So the inside diameter of a 2x2 by quarter would be 1 1/2 inches. Well, you would think, you know, I'm going to take 1 1/2 inch tube and I'm going to slide it in there. Well, you're going to run into what everybody runs into. There's a seam in this tube. That's going to stop that from happening, for one thing. Now, there's a lot of occasions where, especially if it's not a very long sleeve, there's a lot of occasions in fabrication where people will cut that seam, that welded seam out of the inside of the tube. I very rarely do that. And another reason that I very rarely do that, or even need to, is even if that seam was gone, when I see how tight 1 1/2 inches fits, that's just too tight for most of my fabrication. I want a little bit more play than that. I don't want it for most of what I do. You know, if something fit that tight and there's no movement, you get a little rust or paint in there and it's not going to work. I want it to work. I don't normally need it to fit that tight. If you ignore the seam and just think about this and see, how tight that is in there. That's too tight. Now, if I put the 1.5 by 1.5 square tubing into a 2 by 2 by 3/16, for most of what I do, that's great. Got a little play there, you know, that could have some paint, it could rust. You know, that's an amount of movement for most of the stuff, you know, as far as the way that goes on there, and most of the things I do, this is fine. And so if we realize that the 3/16 wall tube is what works, you know, the inside diameter of this 2 by 2 by 3/16 is 1 5/8. So when I put the 1.5 in it, I've got an 1/8 inch of play. That's great. Well, right here, this 1.5 that I stuck in there is an 1.5 by 1.5 by 3/16. That means a 1 inch works in there with a little play. And, you know, with the 3/16 wall tube, that's how it is. Even if you go up bigger, you get the same effect. A 2.5 by 2.5 that's 3/16 wall will accept the 2 inch, a 2 by 2 OD tube. If you need, I want to tell you, if you need a short piece, like a foot long piece of tube, one of the options is to go somewhere and buy one. So let me include that. So right now, if I only needed 1 foot of square tube sleeve that would accept a 2 by 2 to slide in it, I could go to Harbor Freight for about 20 bucks. I could buy a piece a foot long. That's not a great deal per foot, but you know, usually when I buy tubing, I buy a 24-foot stick, which is, you know, you're going to spend $70 to $100 depending on the price at the time. If I was to buy a piece of 2 by 2 by 3/16 right now, I think it would be in that cost range right there. And that's a lot to spend if you only need a piece a foot long. You might want to just run to Harbor Freight or Tractor Supply or somewhere where they've got a piece a foot long. It's probably going to fit a little tighter because those that are sold as hitch receivers, I think, are seamless tubing. And you can also buy seamless tubing, which is too expensive for the stuff I do. The 3/16 wall stuff works great for me, and that's what we're going to pursue on this rack. So the first thing I'm going to do on this rack is I'm going to have a piece of 2 by 2 by 3/16 that goes right here, and this will go in it to keep it from falling this way. And I'll have probably a piece of 1.5 inch that comes out here, down, and then makes a hook to hang my stuff on. And then I'll have sheets that can sit right here. So I'm going to cut some 2-inch tubing to fit in there, and we'll see how that works out. Here's the pieces I just cut, and that tube is slid down in there. You know, it goes down into about there. The bottom is resting on the side basket. So the next piece would be the pieces that weld right to that. They're going to run right out here, and they're going to rest on that side basket. And I'll just have to figure how long. Now, I don't think I want them. I don't want this thing to like be smashed against the side of the truck down here. So I'm probably gonna come out further than the 12 inches, but I don't want a huge gap either. So I think I'll do 13. We'll do 13 inches, cut a couple of 1.5 inches, and we'll see how that looks. The next thing would be a tube that ran down on that up and down. Obviously we got to be at least 4 feet, but I think I could go 50 inches and maybe let 1 inch of it stick up. I wouldn't mind doing that. which comes down about to where, you know, you're at the bottom of the bed. So yeah, and I think on these two 49-inch pieces, I think I could use the lighter tubing. I'm going to go down to an 1.5 by 1.5 that's a 1/8 inch wall or an 11 gauge wall, and then took a measurement about how far the mirror sticks out, and it goes out about a foot, probably from right here. So I'll have a couple pieces, maybe 10 inches, and then with a vertical, make a hook down here, in other words. So there'll be 50 inches, 10 inches, and then maybe, I don't know, a 3-inch hook. Yeah, let's cut some more tubing. I've got my two 50-inch long pieces cut out of the 1/8 inch wall, but those being the longer pieces and a little lighter wall, I think it'll make these things a little easier to carry around. I went ahead and cut the short hook pieces out of the 3/16 wall. That's going to be good, and I think when that hook piece sticks up, I think it's good if this is a 3/16 wall, because I might want to stick a post in that, which would be a piece of 1-inch square tubing that would fit in here. And like we said before, when we want to sleeve one in another, the outer piece, when it's 3/16 wall, that's the way we get the fit we want. If you put a 1-inch tube in an 1.5 by 1.5 by 1/8, you're probably going to have too much slack. And of course, if that's quarter, you don't have enough slack. But since we're talking about 3/16 wall tubing and 1/8 inch wall tubing, something I'm going to go over that some people may not realize is if I line these tubes up, one of them being a 1/8 inch wall and one of them being a 3/16 inch wall, there's something that I notice when I look at them. And I'm wondering if you can tell this, but the corner of that tubing is a lot sharper when the wall thickness is thinner. On your 3/16 here, there's more of a radius at the corner. On the 1/8 inch wall, it's more of a right angle. That's always the case with square tubing. And once you get familiar with different thicknesses of square tubing, you may run into times where you're looking at some square tubing and you're wondering what the wall thickness of it is, and maybe it's all welded together with miter cuts, or the cap's welded on the end, or some way that you can't really see the end of it to see how thick it is. If you've worked with a lot of different thicknesses of square tubing, you could have a decent idea actually what the wall thickness of a tube is just by looking at the way the corner is radiused. Because like I say, the more radius, the more round the corner is, the thicker wall it is. So let's look at some 2-inch tubing. You might be able to see here, I've cleaned that up with a wire brush, and the way I've got this lined up, if you look at it, there's a little bit more radius on this one than there is this one. This one is a 1/4 inch. And this one is a 3/16. So there again, we have the thicker tube is more rounded, more of a radius, and the thinner it is, the more of a right angle. On our pieces that we're making, we know that we have this. We're going to have our 50-inch piece coming down. We need to cut a 10-inch piece to come out, and then we're going to have us a little hook piece that we looked at over there on the table. And one of the things that's kind of nice about the fact that I didn't tack that together right away is, you see, we're putting an 1.5 inch onto a 2-inch. If I had already tacked this together, this would be something that you can't just set flat on the table and expect it to fit. Since the rest of this is 1.5 inches, it would be stuff that we could put together that way. We could just lay it flat on the table and put a piece here, line it up, whatever, and it's all the same size. So what that tells me is this is going to be easier to put together if we tack all the 1.5 inch together first and then add our 2-inch tube. Since I was talking about the radius on those tubes, how it has more of a radius when it's thick, I figured I'd run out here just for fun and show you. This is a 3x3 that's 3/8. So you can see, like, look at what a radius is on that. Almost like a piece of pipe. This is one that's a 4x2, 3/8 inch thick. And you can see it's really rounded, you know, on the corner. You compare that to this one's a 3.5 by 3.5 that's 3/16, and it's a lot sharper. And that's just the way tubing is, but it gives you an idea. You know, if this had a cap welded on it and I was looking at the corner, I could tell that this one was thinner because it's just such a right angle there at the corner. You know, and obviously I could tell that this one's a lot thicker because it's such of a radius. Now I'm at a point where I've got everything cut and I'm about to weld a couple of these tube frames together. Once I get the 1.5 inch stuff welded up, I'll put the 2-inch stuff on the very end. And I'm going to go over something for a minute that I may have talked about before, but when I put something like this tubing together, as I assemble it, I'm not going to jam it perfectly tight. I want a little gap in it. There's a couple reasons for the gap. You know, obviously welding up a gap gives you a little better penetration for your welding. But the other thing is, in order for me to square this up, I don't want it completely tight, and I don't want to count on my cuts to be exactly 90 degrees. I would put a little bit of a gap in my parts. And that gap that I've got in there right now, I would say is probably maybe a little less than 3/32. And I'd put a tack on one side. And when you put a tack on one side and you have a gap, you'll be able to hinge that part on that tack. So if you get a square and you put it on there and you adjust it while it's got that one tack, and you adjust it till it's square, and you have one tack here and you get it square and then you put another tack there, I have good luck getting things squared up like that, especially when it's something fairly small like this. Now I want to talk for a minute about a tube assembly video that I recently watched. And this is a video I watched on YouTube from a really handsome, intelligent feller that I think lives a long ways away from here. The guy was kind of doing a video about whether you need one of these dedicated fabrication tables. And when I say a dedicated fabrication table, the guy sells them. He sells cast iron, perfectly flat, meticulously machined cast iron welding tables that you would be able to clamp parts in to hold them perfectly. And he sells a lot of other squares and things that you can clamp parts to that'll hold them exactly 90 degrees while you're welding them. And what he done in this video is he didn't tell anybody who he was or that he was as involved in fabrication as he is. He just went out to 3 or 4 fab shops and he asked them, gave them a drawing, and he asked them if they would fabricate a tube frame for him. And this tube frame was something that was like about 20 inches by 20 inches from 2-inch square tubing. It had to be square. The welds were supposed to be getting ground off on one side, but not ground off on the other. Went through all of that, and then on the drawing, the level of accuracy for this frame was like less than 1/16 of an inch or 1/16 of an inch, or in some way he was counting on this tube frame to be, in my mind, perfect. I just want to bring that up because, well, another thing about this guy, he sells those squares. They're $50 a piece. He sells those tables. The table that he was testing their frames on that he built, that's an $11,000 table. So he said he had hired these people, 3 different fab shops, 3 different welding shops. He hired them to build him this frame, and then he took their frames back to his shop where he set up a fixture on one of his meticulously machined cast iron tables, and he used 1/16 inch shims that he sells to test if the dimensions and squareness of their frames were within 1/16 of an inch. I can't think of anything I've built that would ever, I can't think of anything that I've built for a long time that would matter anywhere near 1/16 of an inch accuracy. Now keep in mind, this fella is also a machinist. So you're talking about somebody that thinks in thousandths of an inch. I just got to say, I mean, for 99.9% of what I do, if it's within an eighth, it's perfect. For somebody to talk about 1/16 of an inch accuracy on a square tube frame, to me that's absurd. To talk about a welding fabrication shop needs an $11,000 table, I'm not down with that. In most areas, in most of the work that you would do, you would make your work unprofitable by spending that kind of money on stuff. And obviously, I think I could come up with 100 things that would be more profitable to do with $11,000 than to me spend that on a fabrication table. I'm going to tell you, this 5x10 table right here, that is not flat. By that person's standards, that is nowhere near flat. But that is flatter than I ever would need it to be. If we look at a tube frame, just look at the side of that tube frame on the side basket of that truck. If that thing's within 1/4 of an inch from one side to the other, well, let's just say it's 1/4 inch off. Is that going to change the price of tea in China 1 yen? I mean, I don't think so. So I don't want to say that there's anything wrong with what this guy did, but I'm just sharing a thought because after I saw that video, he was kind of knocking on the work quality of these fab shops and saying basically that they needed one of his tables. And if you wanted to weld and fabricate a 20 by 22 inch square tube frame and be able to do them, crank them out where they're all within 1/16 inch in dimensional and squareness accuracy, I still don't think you would need one of those tables. I mean, if I needed to do that, I would get something stronger that was that size and build a jig for doing that. But, to say that I needed one of those tables, boy, I would really have to have some particular stuff to spend $11,000 on a table and buy. The squares that he sells, they're amazing. They're awesome. And those tables are awesome. I'm not trying to say they're not. I'm just saying he's trying to say that you need that, and I just don't run into it. I just don't run into fabrication work that needs to be done at that level of an accuracy to where I would go out telling young people, hey, if you want in this business, you got to buy a bunch of $50 squares and $11,000 welding tables. I just don't believe that. I just don't think you're going to need that to make a living. So I want to put that out there. if you look at these frames right here, you know, the number of 90-degree angles that I need to make here, if I was spending 50 bucks on a square and considering what clamps cost and having to clamp, you know, all of that to a fixture in order to weld it to get it that square, you'd have $400 worth of stuff there to fabricate an assembly that you can't even sell for $400. So I'm going to show you how I do this, you know, and I've talked about it before. You know, I'm going to put a gap in here. I'm going to put a tack on one side. I'm going to hinge that on that tack until it's square. Then I'm going to put a tack on the other side, and then I'll probably add 2 more tacks. I'll continue through with that procedure, and once it's tacked up, I'll weld it out, and it's going to be good. Like, I'm sure, like I have no doubt it's going to be fine. I mean, am I going to say that this assembly is going to be plus or minus 1/16 of an inch accuracy and squareness and dimension? I don't know, and I don't care. It doesn't need to be. It's not, for what it's going to do, it's irrelevant. So let's do that. Let's tack it up, weld it up, and we'll see what we got. I looked around in the scrap and I found some material that was 1/4 inch thick. And I'm using that to set on the table. I got another one here and one here. I'm using that to set on the table to help me put that in the right place to go ahead and put this tube on, since that's 2 inch and the other's 1.5 inches. That 1/4 inch stuff will help me hold it where it needs to be so that my 1.5 inch tube is in the center of the 2 inch. So let's put those on. One more little thing. I was wondering if you had some material leaned up there, you were going to get another piece, you might get worried about that material falling over. If you had something like that to throw over there, that would keep it from falling off, and you could still come over and put another piece on. And then you could also use this like that. This is just a bunch of ideas of things you can do, you know, where a square tube goes into another square tube. There's a million things you can do with that. So, you know, we just don't know if we can really go and give this a big thumbs up quite yet. Not sure when I'll get to try it. I'm glad I got a chance to make it, and that's it for this one. Thanks for watching.